let's jump in. We're here to talk about Latinos in media, and we have representatives on our panel this morning from entertainment, news, policy, and academia. And we're going to be trying to answer some of the questions with regard to what's going on for Latinos within the media, how are we portrayed, but also how are we changing things behind the scenes, and why should we all care? And just so you know, we're going to do an introduction of the panelists, and then we have some prepared questions because we really want to get an idea of the landscape, but then we're going to jump into Q&A. So really get ready, because I'd like this to be an interactive session this morning. So our panelists, we're going to start with Vanessa Cárdenas. She's Vice President of Progress 2050 at American Progress. Her work focuses on the intersection of policy and race, with particular attention to demographic changes, immigration, and issues relevant to the growing Latino community in the U.S. She was profiled as one of the 100 people to watch in the next century by Washington Magazine and is a regular guest on CNN en Español, Telemundo, Univision, and BBC, among others. And just so you know, if you haven't already caught it, CAP, the Center for American Progress, has a booth out there, and you can get a lot of different reports that they've put together. She's going to be talking about the book that they recently put out, and one of the reports is the fact sheet, The State of Latinos in the United States. So good information for those of you who want some research. Francisco Cortez is Vice President of FoxNewsLatino.com, and he was also a key player in helping create and launch the groundbreaking English language news site in 2010. And he's going to talk about that. So really kind of think about what he had done to make that happen. He now leads and mentors a team of experienced journalists through all phases of content creation. He's been part of the Fox News family since 1999, and he's a U.S. Army veteran, and he served as a squad leader. So thank you for service to our country.
Well,
our next panelist may need no introduction, but I'm going to introduce him anyway. Edward James Olmos has achieved extraordinary success as an actor, producer, and humanitarian. The Tony, Emmy, and Academy Award nominated actor is probably best known for his role on Battlestar Galactica as Admiral William Adam. His career in entertainment spans over 30 years, and his dedication to his craft has brought him attention across the industry and with audiences. He was originally a musician, for those of you who didn't know, and you all probably remember him portraying the iconic El Pachuco in Zoot Suit. But in addition, Mr. Olmos' passion for the arts, in addition to his passion for the arts, he always gives back, and we're really going to talk about his advocacy for Latinos and the portrayal of Latinos, particularly in non-stereotypical ways. And he's a humanitarian and serves with a lot of nonprofit organizations. Professor Federico Suberi is a full professor at the School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Kent State University in Ohio. Since the early 1980s, he's been conducting research, publishing, and teaching on a broad range of issues regarding mass media and ethnic minorities, especially Latinos in the US. He's published more than 50 journal articles, essays, and book chapters, and is author of the book, The Mass Media and Latino Politics. He has analyzed how Latinos and Latino issues were covered by national news networks, ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN from 2008 to 2012. And that's actually where we're going to start. We're going to start with some of that research and those statistics. So I'm going to go ahead and let him talk about his research. Although I do want to remind you, please feel free to tweet. We've got a hashtag #LatMedia. Everyone's Twitter handles are up here. We would love for you to talk about what we are talking about this morning. So, go for it.
Go for the next slide, please. Buenos dias. It's been a number of years that I've been doing research about Latinos and media, and just yesterday a student from a university called me and said, "What's the image of Latinos and what has changed in the last 20 years?" And I said, "Well, which media, which type of media are you talking about, and what type of images, because it's not the same for all of them." And one context that I give my students every single time is that whatever we're talking about in terms of the impact of the images of media, we have to keep in mind that the repetition of those images, if they're presented in a dramatic way with sounds and visuals, and if they're perceived relevant for the people, and whether or not people have a frame of reference for understanding them is what determines how people will interpret whatever they see. I'm not an expert on the images of Latinos in film or television, although I could say something about that given what I've read. But my most recent study, and this is going to be just the short part of it because we want to make it interactive, is the images of Latinos in network news. And I've been studying this for a number of years. This is just a bit of the last study. This is just a highlight of the last study. Next slide. The Latino population in 1995 was about 10.3% of the national total, and the representation of Latinos as the main characters in the news was ABC, CBS, NBC, and CNN was 1% of the news, approximately 1% of all the news. Altogether, these four networks published about 16,000 news stories per year. And of all those 16,000 stories, 1% were primarily about Latinos. Now let's look at what happened from 2008 to 2012. Next slide. So our population is 17%, and the network news that focused on Latinos is less than 1%. Wow. Made progress, and let me tell you, in one of the years it was 0.02%. 0.06 for all of those from 2008 and 2012. Have we made progress? No. So what is the answer to that? Well, one of the reasons that we are not portrayed is because of the decision makers in those places where they decide what Latino news are and why they should be there. I really appreciate all the efforts that have come about with the social media and the blogging to give our own story. But that's not enough. We have to make an impact in the network news someday soon too. And I hope that what Fox is doing and what other networks have tried to do make a difference, because this is just a synopsis. If I were to go on to tell you about the topics of which we are covered, you can guess. You got two, you got one answer, and then the other answer, crime and immigration, but let's go from there. We're not in the news, and that's a major problem that we still have to face.
So I would definitely encourage you to find out more from Professor Severi with regard to his research and what it's saying and all of the details within it. But Vanessa, why don't you talk to us for a minute about policy?
Sure.
So this is what people are saying about us. What do you see from a policy angle?
Sure. And I think to give a little bit of context, I have to tell you a little bit about what I do. I work at the Center for American Progress, which is one of the leading policy think tanks in Washington, D.C. We deal with a range of issues from immigration to economic policy to education and so on. And I oversee a project called Progress 2050. And it's called Progress 2050 because it's about the changing demographics in our nation and sort of implications of that. As you all know, by 2043, the census projects that the majority of people in the United States are going to be people of color. In the project that I oversee and the book that we just published, I brought a few copies, All in Nation, An America That Works for All, and you can find it online at allinnation.org, makes a fundamental argument that if we don't close racial gaps, we're not going to be able to compete globally in the future.
Can I just join you for just a second and mention that you can download that book for free, the entire book online.
That's correct. Thank you. Mainly that closing racial gaps is not just a moral imperative, but an economic imperative as well. So how this relates to policy is the following. I think that the reason media matters is because at the end of the day, these are all issues of the lack of representation. So while in this conference we're talking about sort of the buying power of Latinos, which is huge, their influence in media, which is obviously, as bloggers, is growing, which is important. We talk about the Latino vote. Everybody talks about, for example, in the election that 12 million Latino voters voted, which is a great thing for us. But nobody talks about the 11.1 that are eligible but did not vote. So while there's obviously a really good story to tell about our growing influence and impact, at the end of the day, when you look at the numbers, as the professor showed, we're definitely lacking in representation in the media. And that's also a reflection of the fact that we are not in positions of power in the United States. Only 3% of elected officials nationwide are elected officials. And that's at the state level. And at the national level, it's only 1%. You can find all those stats in the book. And this lack of representation in media matters because, as also another statistic in terms of media representation, only 2% of guests in, for example, the Sunday talk shows in 2012 were Latino. Now, everybody, all the politicians in DC and all the thought leaders in DC are paying attention who is in that Sunday talk show and what they're saying, because that implies power. Now, when you look at the op-ed pages in papers across the nation, there was a study that was done also in 2012, and the study showed that less than 0.5%, less than 0.5% of op-eds in the major newspapers, New York Times, Washington Post, and Wall Street Journal, were written by Latinos in a 2-month period. That is really outrageous when you think about it. Now, all of this matters again because these media, TV networks, Sunday talk shows, newspapers are really about engaging in the public dialogue about the policy issues that matter to us. And it matters for people that make policy, people that are trying to advance policy for the benefit of the community, because if our folks are not engaged in that conversation, we cannot improve the policy. And you know what happens when we're not engaged in the policy. I think the immigration issue is a great example. Another reason why it matters as a social movement is that when our stories are not being accurately reflected, then you don't hear all of the story. Again, immigration is another example. If you're hearing just about border enforcement, if you're hearing about how people broke the law, and you're not talking about sort of the human impact of our immigration policies, you don't have the complete story. And I think there's a huge difference in how English language media portrays immigration versus Spanish language media. And we can talk about those differences. And the last thing I would say is that it matters for our democracy. And I think what's happening in Congress today is an example of what happens when only a group of people have the biggest impact and the biggest voice in policy. So when you look, for example, at the Sunday talk show, another statistics shows that the majority of people that attend those talk shows are mainly white, conservative, and older folks. And our Congress reflects that, right? So right now, for example, in the House of Representatives, even though the majority of Americans, time and time again, say they support an immigration policy with a path to legalization, we have the Tea Partiers that are holding the Republican Party hostage, and they don't want to advance an immigration policy that would really benefit the United States as a whole, not just Latinos, but the United States as a whole. Again, an example of how a small group of people is in control and is in power, regardless of the fact that the majority of Americans support a path to legalization for immigrants. So I'm going to stop right there, but I think I just wanted to make the connection between the fact that numbers by themselves don't equal power. You have to sort of leverage that. And that if we're not engaged in the public debate, we're going to be absent from the conversation.
So we've heard a little bit of bad news, right? we
That's
did
really
from the first two panelists, which I'm sure you guys will be talking about more stuff.
Yeah.
But let's talk to Francisco for a minute, because he has been a network executive for 15 years. And I think that in itself is very interesting. And he's been with Fox News during that time, but he was also part of actually launching the initiative that is now Fox News Latino. And that's really about kind of changing the narrative from the news angle and doing something really different. So let's talk a little bit about what you do at Fox News and how you got that to happen.
Buen día, Hispanicized. I'm glad that you all are here and awake, so it's a good thing. My name is Francisco Cortez. I'm the Vice President of Fox News Latino. A little bit about myself, Puerto Riqueño, born in Puerto Rico. I grew up in the South Bronx. My lifelong dream was to serve the military, and I was honored to do that for 7 years. And then I jumped into from one army to the other. The other army was, media. And I started early on in my career in 1999, when I was that pushy Puerto Rican in the newsroom asking questions. It's like, how do you do that? How do you do that? I became an associate producer, a producer. I noticed that, as time progressed and as my career progressed, that I worked for a pretty powerful company, actually one of the biggest and largest media companies in the world, which is News Corp. And I was fortunate to start at Fox News early on. And I noticed that as my career developed, I became a producer, a senior producer. When I got to management, I caught the eye of our chairman, Roger Ailes, who's worked for several politicians and created Fox News, Fox Business. I was like, espérate, ¿dónde está un Latino in that boardroom? And I noticed there weren't many. And I wanted to reflect change in such a large media organization. So how does a pushy Puerto Rican do that? I just don't come to work every day. I refuse to do that. I come into an organization to reflect change. One of the reasons that I pitched, launched, and executed Fox News Latino was precisely because I think as a community we still have a long way to go. So what is having access to one of the largest microphones in the world mean to me if I can't service my community? So I pitched to all the senior executives the idea of launching the first of its kind English language news site for US Latinos. And they loved it. They said, do it, hire an amazing team of journalists.
The first time? So you just
For the
went in
first time.
No, I mean, you just went in the first time and you said, hey, let's do this. And they said, sure, let's do it.
Very good question. Absolutely not. It took me over.
Just wanted to make sure they heard the story.
It took me a very long time. I developed a business model. I targeted key executives that had the power and the influence to make these decisions. I was like, if you ever watch Bruce Lee and he's fighting like 12 floors of people, that was me. I was like, oh yeah, oh my God. So I built what I did. I was very strategic. I said, if I fail in this venture, it's gonna make a big difference in how large media executives with power, down from the CEO to the moneymakers to reporters, look at us as Latinos. So I cannot fail at this. I cannot fail, and I'm going to make it my mission and my priority to make sure that we launch a powerful, effective initiative called Fasos Latino. So I built a Bible, I called it my Bible, and I presented it to every stakeholder, and it took me 18 months. One by one. Every month I had a meeting with every stakeholder until I got to the 18th one. And then I got to the CEO, and in 3 minutes he goes, I've heard from everyone who's worked for me for 30 years about your idea. I love it, let's launch it. So 18 months it took me. And there was honestly some times where I felt, I was like, am I gonna do this? Is it really gonna happen? Is Fox News really gonna support a Latino initiative? First of all, it was the first Latino initiative. There was ABC wasn't doing it, NBC wasn't doing it, CNN was doing it in Spanish, but no one was doing it in English. So finally I got the blessing and I did the Puerto Rican skip jump all across the newsroom. And I started hiring the best in the industry. So we've been out for 3 years, making some power moves, and I continue to support and really make change for our community. So that was a little bit of my journey.
Yeah, and we'll come back to kind of your day-to-day, which I also think is really interesting. But Mr. Olmos, you have been in Hollywood for a long time, and you're coming at this from the creative angle. And I'm really curious, I want to hear about an insider's perspective, the changes you've seen, what we're still facing, and kind of the best way to move forward. What do you see?
Things have gotten, as the professor said, have gotten increasingly worse because of the number of people that we are. Our population is so strong, and there's so many of us that in my industry, what happened this last weekend was a monumental disaster. Cesar Chavez did not go through the roof. Therefore, we will not see any more movies about our leaders in any perspective, whatever it is. It needed to make at least $6 million this last weekend, and made half of that in 700 theaters. Philly Brown made $1.5 million in 150 theaters in this opening weekend. You start to see, and they consider that to be a very successful film. Those numbers are like voting. 11 million people that are eligible to vote and don't vote, we just shot ourselves in the foot. And that whole issue is, we all know. Last night we showed Water and Power. How many people saw it last night? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 of us. Why all of us weren't in there? Hey, we had things to do. There are very important things to do, like we had to have lunch or dinner, we had to eat, we had to talk with each other, we had to celebrate because we had worked all day. Any reason under the sun not to go see it and blog about it and talk about it and get it out there. You missed a really good movie, a very different film. Water and Power is uniquely one of a kind because of the writing. And I gotta tell you, there's no art form on the planet that is stronger than the audiovisual event when it's projected on a big screen. We all know that. We know that deeply embedded in our hearts. And yet we will go see Captain America this weekend, but we won't go see, last weekend, Cesar Chavez. And to me, because we do make up, what I made my company, I've been working with AMC in a very different way of promoting and distributing film, especially our independent film, but especially Latino film. So Water and Power is going to be our first adventure into it. And they were supposed to have put our trailers in 20 venues in Los Angeles and San Diego. We're supposed to be placed in the theaters that are AMC theaters where Cesar Chavez was playing, and they would play our trailer along before the movie starts, because that's the people we want to see our film. Makes a lot of sense. Well, they failed. They didn't get the trailer into the theaters. Everybody goes, oh, I thought we told her. Yeah, right, okay. So somebody drops the ball. Who knows? It was on the AMC side because we had everything set and we had shipped everything to them. So I was a little hurt by that, and I called them on Monday, and we sat down and on the phone, and we had a meeting on the phone, and I got them, and I just got word right now. I just got them emailed not even more than maybe 10 minutes ago. I said to them, okay, now that we've missed Cesar Chavez, I want our trailer in Captain America. Okay, you would?
Yeah.
And so they're putting into out of the 20 theaters that we're going to be playing in the in Los Angeles, Southern California, we will be in 17 of those theaters in front of Captain America. Now I know for a fact that 52 to 54% of all the people that'll go opening weekend are Latino to see Captain America. We love motion pictures. We love to go. We love to travel. We see a lot more, and there's so many already. So many things that have come out in studies. For so many years, I've been watching people study.
Yeah.
And it doesn't change one thing. What it does do, it does alert people that want to be alerted to how far we've fallen back. As of right now, I can tell you we have fallen back. They say that we're 17% of the population. That's conservative. I gotta tell you, we're a lot more than that, but I think that there's some cultures that would just freak out and they found out that people of color there's a lot more than 30-70. They think we're 70% Caucasian and 30% all others, and that's really off. Between the African American experience, the Asian experience, and the Latino experience, and the indigenous experience even, we are well into the 40% plus. And it just freaks them out. I mean, they are so unready for this. And people go, well, why are they so unready? Well, because we don't see anything. I mean, I'll just ask one question and then I'll stop talking because I can go on like this forever. It's crazy. Because I'll ask the question, name me one American hero that you studied any time in your life in the United States, male or female, that hero born in the United States of America, of Latino descent. Name me one national hero that you've studied. You can't. You can't mention one because we don't have one. We want one, but we don't have one. If it wasn't for the African American experience of Martin Luther King, we wouldn't have one person of color that we say thank you to as a nation. He's the only one. So that being said, you see how far we have to go and why. When we teach 97 to 98% of the national curriculum on history from the first grade through the 12th grade is European based. It's all European based. So our children learn a lot about the contributions of the Europeans in the United States of America, but they learn very little, if nothing, about any other culture. So that balance leads them to not understand us at all. Stereotypes abound. My films have been very strong in trying to understand that problem. Even though I've made some very, very difficult films to watch. American Me was very difficult to watch. Anybody that watched that movie was just putting themselves through hell. What the hell am I doing here? Why am I watching this? Because it wasn't romanticized, it wasn't glamorized. It was the same subject matter as The Godfather, but yet it was completely, uniquely its own piece. And you could not, no one came out of my American Me humming the theme song. Everybody came out of The Godfather humming the theme song. Everybody. Everybody wanted to be Michael Corleone or part of the Corleone family. Nobody wanted to be in Santana's family. Actually, that movie diverted more people, more young people, out of going into that lifestyle much more than any other film that's ever been made. And that was the total purpose of doing that film. If you want to live in this life, here's what you're going to live in. And now that you haven't used this as like a training film, you go into prison, you go in there and this is what you're going to have to do, and these are the people you're going to have to meet, and this is how you do it, and then you'll be you'll be number one in some prison. You'll come out and they'll give you a party when you come out on the street, back home. They give big parties when they come out. All right, that's fine. I understand it, but I got to tell you, when they see it and they really get to live it, more kids watch that movie, and almost religiously, and now have decided not to go into that world and doing something else with their lives. And that was the whole intention of the movie. So all I can tell you is that we're in worst shape ever. What happened this last weekend was a monumental blow in the history of Latinos in the United States of America. Why? Because a film about one of the great leaders, Latino leaders, was not propagated by all of us going, even if you don't like the movie, buy a ticket and don't go. You know what I mean? Jesus. Okay, don't waste your time, but buy a ticket. It's all about that vote. And we lost it. We had the opportunity, we lost it. And I'll tell you, it hurt me. It hurts me because, and it makes me cry, like right now I get very emotional because, my children's children. When I leave here, I'm 67, I feel really good. I know I look good, okay? It's my health, I feel really good. And I might make it to 100. I'm gonna try to make it to 120. And if I don't, I'm gonna die trying. But I can honestly tell you, when I leave here, I had to come to terms with this. I'm leaving this planet in worse shape than when I got here. And I've done a lot of work trying to make it the other way around. So when I left here, it would be, a better place than what I found. We've dropped the ball every single time. And the reason we've dropped the ball is because we lack really a strong sense of commitment on behalf of our culture. Whether you be, Central American, South American, Caribbean, from Spain, I don't care what part of Latin America you're from, your cultural dynamic. We've dropped the ball. And our writers don't get, our authors don't get, bombastically over, we don't have, overwhelming numbers on buying our books, our paintings, our art forms. Once in a while you'll squeeze through, a Carlos Santana who musically just devastates the whole world, and then it doesn't matter about culture anymore. Boom, it just shoots right past it all. But very seldom. And I have no problem with being Latino. I like the hyphen, and I've always used it, but there are very few of us that are coming. Most people don't want to be categorized as a Latino actor. They just want to be an actor. Like nobody says, wow, Dustin Hoffman, what a great Jewish American actor. Or, De Niro, what a great Italian American actor. They don't do that. They just say actor, actor. And a lot of us only want it to be that way. I don't. I like what I am, and I put that first. I am Latino, and proud of it.
So I really wanted Mr. Olmos to talk because I think for a little while, because I do think that what you said actually is really profound. Yes. That we really get a lot out of the creative media side of things, right? I mean, seeing images of ourselves, seeing what that looks like, who represents us. I don't know how many of you were at least a little bit slightly pissed off when Argo, had a Latino personage that was not represented by a Latino. So I think there's something really important to be said about Hollywood and its representation in the media. I'd like to give each of the panelists just a moment now to respond to each other and kind of talk about what you brought up, what each of you brought up, and then what I want to do is I want to open it up to questions so we can have much more of a discussion, because I think there's a lot going on here.
Yeah, well, I really hear Mr. Olmos' comments, and I feel his pain. I think that we all do. However, I do have a lot of faith in our community moving forward, and I'll give you one example. Obviously, immigration policy is my strength, and I think that what we've seen with the Dreamers movement really bodes well for our community moving forward. When we saw young people really taking this issue and put a human face to it, and not only put a human face to it, but really be willing to go and fight for it, whether it's on the halls of Congress, whether it's in the communities. I mean, we had those 3 dreamers that walked from Miami all the way to Washington, D.C., and along the way stopped in different communities in the South to talk about how this issue affects them. And what I hope that will come out of that is that more Latinos, leading by this really new generation of savvy young people that know how to, not only, they're Latino and they're American, 100%. What was the phrase yesterday that we are
200%.
We're the 200. We're 100% Latinos and we're 100% Americans, right? That this generation is really going to be savvy about how to work the system so that they can make change, but they're also really connected and value their culture and their community. But I also think that everybody in this room really needs to make an effort to what Mr. Olmos said, to really have a commitment to promote our talent in every space, whether it's in media, whether it's in your job, whether it's in your community. Because if we themselves don't create those avenues of access, those paths, those support systems, nobody else will. And I think that's the message we should say. Yes, we have a long way to go. We do have a lot of power. If we would show up, if we would spend our money wisely, we would have a lot of power. So we have the potential, and we just need to act on it.
Just to reflect on a few things that the panelists said. I hope to live maybe to 115 para seguir la conversación.
You can do it, man.
Who knows? Again, in a nutshell, life is short. It really is. And it's up to you, it's up to us. There's a lot of work to be done, but on the positive side, it takes all of us to do it. Less talking, more doing. Like right now, fine, I'm here in a panel and I've become one of the youngest vice president at Fox News, the first Latino. So what do I do with that? Okay, so you just told me you had a difficulty getting that story out about the film, about a Latino veteran. So right after this panel, I'm going to talk to Edward, and I'm going to use my microphone to bring light to that. That's effective change. And if you don't concentrate on effective change, then what are you doing? Why are you coming to these panels? So it takes networking, it takes access. I have a lot of access from the White House. I have, conversations with politicians. I have really close relationships with community leaders, pardon my French, who gives a shit what I have if I don't do something with it. And that's how you guys have to. That's what everyone really has to focus, do this, do that. Just go out, network, and leverage the relationships that we as Latinos have with one another. That's what I have.
As a Puerto Riqueño in academia, my circle of influence is the students who have to take my classes and they have no choice, and then they're stuck there for a semester listening about Latinos in media, and I've got a couple of them who've been through my classes here. And my hope is that when they get into the newsrooms or in the production studios or in the advertising companies or wherever they are in the future, they'll make a difference there. And that's what has kept me going for all these years. And I know for sure that I've seen some of the differences that they have made. And in fact, I warned them that if I see that they've gone back to some stereotypes, I'll go to the registrar's office and change their grade retroactively, because I'll fail them retroactively when I see them doing what they're not supposed to do. So, but I have seen that positive change in my circle of influence, because that's all I can do. And the studies there, there's been dozens and dozens, as Eddie says, of these studies. The problem is that we haven't got to the people. We talk to ourselves when we make these studies, and we don't get them across. The study that I just finished this year, and the ones that I've been involved with in previous years about the images of the portrayals of Latinos in network news, that have been sponsored by the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, and the most recent one by the Communications Workers of America. What I hope is, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists didn't get to the network executives and sit them down with the study. They just had a press release. Now, come on, folks. get the network executives to read this and challenge them on what we just found and do something about it, not just complain about it in a little press release. By the way, the Communications Workers of America, the other part of the study is the portrayal of labor and labor issues in news. And if you think it's bad for Latinos, take the point 06 and make that a point 02 for labor news in the same time period in the same network news. It's even worse for news. And on CNN is one of those that has done the least in portraying labor and labor issues in news as primary stories and given the voice of labor speakers in those news stories, which is the problem also with the news that we code. There's stories about Latinos, but Latinos are not the speakers, they're not the sources, they're not the ones that are talking about their issues, it's someone else interpreting them. So hopefully someone who will read these stories this next round and get across. And we haven't studied how Fox has been doing the news because we depend on the Vanderbilt archives, and then if we do Fox News, we want to do MSNBC, and it takes time and money to do that, so we've not done those two because it's just too challenging, and anybody who's done content analysis will know that. Now, what is crucial in any one of these is that those who are in this room and have a position of power to use it, as Francisco has been doing for all these years, as Eddie, as Vanessa, in their circles of influence, and mine is the academic world. But use it. Don't just talk about it. And if I've changed universities in 4 occasions, it's because at every one I've made an impact in the academic setting for talking and changing the issues of diversity, and particularly for me, for Latinos. So use that power that you have wherever it is. Don't just sit back, fight for it, and if you're not comfortable doing so, move on to something else and leave the door open for someone else who will make a difference in those circles where you are, because that's what will bring about the change before we turn 120 and something, whatever it is that we aim to go.
Mr. Jones, do you want to have another comment about what?
No, I think everybody's on. Let's just open it up.
Great,
because
let's do it. Go ahead.
We don't have enough
Question.
time.
Hi, my name is Angela Martinez, and I work in the music business, and I see that that's what the comment you said about, musicians even, see, you got a Bruno Mars that's Puerto Rican, but he can't come out with his last name because then he'll be put in a box, so I see that's very prevalent, and I also see that even in the music business, when our legends pass, there's no branding that goes with that, and so when I apply that to the movie business and in the Cesar Chavez situation, I see that, and the comparable to me is Che. And so Che, there's been branding, Gap has it, Urban Outfitters. There's been such an effort to brand Che Guevara over the years. I see kids that don't even know what that man represents, and they're like, yeah, I bought it at Urban Outfitters. So I wonder if there's maybe something that we can do in branding some of these heroes and some of these legends so that we can cultivate the curiosity of the next generation to want to go to some of these movies.
All right, I'll jump on that real quick. Yeah, it would be great if you could brand people that are not known. Basically, that's what we're talking about. Our heroes are not known. I mean, look, P-Rod's doing really well right now. Paul Rodriguez Jr. He's got his own skateboard, empire, and he's doing very well. And hopefully, he'll continue to move forward. Different sports enthusiasts, great athletes, great musicians, and they do. Jennifer Lopez has great lines of clothing. She has makeup. She has, she brands herself and she moves forward on it. I got to tell you, the issue always comes down to how do you, like you even said it. Bruno couldn't use his real last name because it would stigmatize him into being a Latino, and then he would be, wouldn't make that crossover into the and a lot of people have done that. A lot of names have been changed. Marty Sheen changed his name for that reason. A lot of us have done that, but I think it's us, not them. I think when we have fun and enjoy, it's like the African American experience exploded once the African Americans started to go see African American films. The whole thing changed. All of a sudden, white people want to see African American films. What are they watching over there? And it worked, but we don't do that. Or any of our art forms do we do that. And when we do, we end up, marginalizing them ourselves. We are our own worst enemy. I mean, nobody hits me harder than my own. And so that's fine, I got it, and that's part of the system that we have to work under. I will say that optimistically, but I'm pragmatic. That's what really makes it difficult, like I really do have my head up in Venus somewhere, out there in the universe, but my feet are well grounded inside of what we're standing on, Earth here. And when I look at life through those eyes of a person who's really got nothing but love for the arts and the life that I'm, that's such a privileged life I've had. It's incredible, and it hasn't been, like stunning. For people in my category of life, had they won Best Actor awards, have they won all that I've won, and if I was not Latino and did, I would be at a much higher level of understanding in this industry if I looked like Tom Cruise or something. But basically, we have a choice to make. Do we continue fighting the battle, or do we not? Do we retire?
So I've got 5 people waiting,
Go.
6, go ahead.
My name's David Quinones. I'm the managing editor of Poder Hispanic Magazine, and before that I was a journalist with the Miami Herald, and every time I had a Latino-focused story, I could find it in the English edition of the Herald on maybe page 4B, and then out front of El Nuevo Herald, usually on 1A. And then, I moved on to, Francisco and I know each other and sort of work in similar arenas. He's in the stratosphere and I'm sort of in the grunt work. But I feel like these brands are sub-brands that we've built and that we're really proud of. Fox News Latino, that does great reporting, my magazine, and a lot of other, these sub-branded, CNN Latino, which is dearly departed now. It gives the rest of the world sort of a license to ignore. Like that's a place. That's the El Nuevo Herald. You just wrote an El Nuevo Herald story. Let's just put it over there. It's going to be okay over there. And it almost gives the rest of the media consuming society a pass. Don't worry about that Hispanic story. We're going to put that on our Hispanic website. We're going to put that on our Hispanic.
They wouldn't have it anyway. That's the problem. They wouldn't have it anyway. And that's why there has to be Latino-oriented media.
I agree, but I want to break down that wall. It feels like there's a wall.
Yeah.
So you made an excellent point, and some companies I've seen have that mentality where if you have a Latino business unit, let's throw it over there. So this is where the pushy Puerto Rican comes in. I sit in 2 board executive meetings every day, 7:30 in the morning and at 4 o'clock. With the senior executives to all of Fox, bureau chiefs all across the U.S. and internationally, and every executive producer in the channel. I push my strongest 3 stories, Hispanic-focused stories, toward the channel. A second thing I did, aside from having my product online, so my stories are reported on TV every day. It pushes our voice forward. And I said, how else can I staple Latinos on the network? I hired a Dominican intern when I launched Fox News Latino. He was 22 years old. I saw a lot of promise. I said, I'm going to put you on TV. Give me a few years. Lex knows. I think a year ago, I made him the first Dominican U.S. Hispanic on Fox News. And he's reporting for the channel and Latino, Fox News Latino. So I don't marginalize and I don't stop at the website. I make sure that it's progressed forward.
So I know we've got several more questions. You were next. We might have time for 1 or 2 more. I know we're wrapping up, and I also want to give the panelists time to say their closing remarks, and then for folks who want to stay after that, after the time is stopped. I mean, to the extent the panelists are willing to stay, we can certainly continue the conversation, but I want to honor all of our time. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. I'm Janine Miranza from Madres Conectadas. It's a website in Spanish, and it's from the Dominican Republic. And I'm wondering, I work all about my blog is about connection with the families and all that stuff. But I wonder, how can we as parents begin to do something to change that view that you are portraying us? How can we educate our kids so they can look up to someone, get oriented around how they can be more powerful? Should I say to my kid, you can do whatever you want, you can be whoever you want? How can I encourage? Because Latinos tend to think, no, you cannot be an astronaut, no, you cannot win an Oscar, no, you cannot do that. And we just cut our wings because we think we cannot reach them. But we are here in a panel where we see many people who have achieved that things that we educate our kids so they cannot do it. So how can you think what is going to be our approach to change those things in the future for our next generation?
I think I would say I have two kids. I have a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old. But I want to talk to you about the Castro brothers from Texas. Young, elected, yes, that's what Julian and Joaquin. And I think what's striking about their story is whenever they talk to the media about how they were raised, they talked about the fact that their mom used to engage them from early on in sort of her social activism. So yes, she was talking about go to school and do the best and speak English and all of that, but at the same time, she would take him to all the meetings in terms of organizing Latino workers in Texas. So I think we have to do both. We have to obviously make sure that our kids are succeeding in the mainstream, but we also have to make sure, as we mentioned here, that they also appreciate and value our culture and that they understand that they also have the responsibility really to be connected to their culture and promote themselves and others. That it's not just about them, that it's about the broader community. And that, we all have power to change. I think everybody in this room can write an op-ed to their paper. One, to ask, how come you didn't cover this in our local paper? How come you didn't have a Latino voice talking about the Latino vote on your TV show? So we can all do that. And we can also ask, where's your Latino talent? And we can say, especially with social media, we can tweet at them, we can Facebook them and say, hey, I noticed that you are not having reporters or producers that are reflecting my community. So use that power.
But for the kids, it's a different story because the kids are exposed to peers who do not have knowledge or a frame of reference about who and what we are. And my daughter's 30-something, so I went through that phase in which her frame of reference was peers who did not value what she was, a child of Latino Puerto Riqueño parents who had a value for being Puerto Riqueño in California and then in Texas. In my first slide, it's providing the children the understanding, that frame of reference, and that's talking to them about the meaning of the different world, about the meaning of the others, the meaning of being Puerto Riqueño, Mexicano. It's providing that frame of reference, and I could go on with a whole class about that, but I'm not going to do it now. But it is providing the children, your neighbors, your friends, with a positive frame of reference about our culture. And we can only do that on the one-to-one because we're bombarded by repeated dramatic negative images about us in films, in most news, and we have to provide it in our homes and in our circle of influence, that positive frame of reference.
So I know I've got multiple of you who have let me know you want to make comments, and we're out of time right now. I want to give all the panelists 30 seconds to have their very short closing remarks, and then I will make sure that we end the panel right on time.
There's a lot of room to grow. Think about the 12 billion that voted. Think about the 11 that could vote but did not. And I think that's sort of the mentality that we need to have, our potential, and act on it.
I'm around until Saturday, and I look forward to connecting with everyone here. Seriously, I know you guys have a lot of questions, and I hope to answer as much as I can. Tweet me. I'll give you my business card afterwards, and we can connect and keep the conversation going. But thank you all for joining the conversation today.
Quickly, I just want to say that Water and Power will be coming out on May 2nd. Yeah, I have no vested interest in it other than the fact that I want to see the movie be successful so that the door will open a little bit. So it's May 2nd in Southern California, from Los Angeles to San Diego. I think up around Sacramento a little bit, I'm not sure. But you can go online and you can see it, the Water and Power film. and you'll be able to go on and see what we're playing. And hopefully, if it's successful in Southern California, you'll get to see it in your, around the country. So we'll see.
Well, and I love what Mr. Olmo said a minute ago. If you don't live in Southern California, you can get online and buy tickets. That's right. Awesome.
Yeah, that would truly be a first.
My closing remarks is that if you're here, you're already an activist, but move it a notch up and expand your circle of influence. Get resources. There are lots of them out there in academic circles, in media circles, the National Association of Hispanic Journalists, the National Hispanic Media Coalition. All of these are fighting together to make a difference. Work with yourselves and with others to make that change in broader circles of influence.
Let's take a minute to thank our wonderful